Okay, very good evening to everyone. Very warm welcome. Thank you for joining us for this AGM dinner, this annual event. Thank you very much to our charter members. We actually had our AGM earlier. It went through very smoothly. There were no protests, so that was very good. And a very, very warm welcome to all our guests and our community. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with TiE, but maybe I'll spend like just 30 seconds just telling everyone what TiE is and what it is that we do. We are the world's largest entrepreneur investor foundation. We are a not-for-profit and we exist to support entrepreneurs. And the way we do that is by bringing together purpose-driven individuals who are our charter members in different parts of the world, and they come together. They could be founders, they could be investors or corporate leaders, because you need their entire ecosystem to come together to be able to support the startup ecosystem. So I'm very privileged and proud to be the president. I'm in my first term. I've completed 14 months. It's been a great 14 months. And we, as I said, we shared some of the highlights with the community. But today, there's also a very special moment for us. We take a lot of pride in what our charter members do. And I'm so honored today to have this opportunity to be able to unveil a great feat by a very successful entrepreneur, Prashant, who's our charter member, and the privilege of being able to be part of his global book launch. And Prashant has, I think writing a book takes a lot of commitment. I don't think I could do one. I mean, I could. Chris runs our marketing. He's our CMO. If he finds me a ghostwriter, maybe I could get a book written. But I can't write it myself. I can write reports. I've been an analyst long enough. I can write like a 20-page report, maybe. But write a book and then get it published by Penguin. Now that's worth celebrating. So that's what we're here for. We're here to celebrate Prashant's success, his ability to capture all his experiences and learnings and encapsulate it into this wonderful book that we're going to celebrate today. And as part of this process, just the proceedings for the evening, we're going to have a fireside chat being hosted by Prantik Mazumdar. Prantik himself is a founder. I mean, this is a very special set of people here. Because of these three, Ritu, I haven't checked if you sold the company yet. You may have, but at least these two have sold their companies to some of the biggest global MNCs, and they're very successful founders. And Prantik also want to take the opportunity that we also pass the motion that Prantik is stepping in as the president-elect for TiE, and Prantik and I will be working together and eventually hand over as the custodian of TiE that position to Prantik. So that's a big part of the celebration. So Prantik, I'm going to hand it over to you. In your safe hands. I mean, especially now that you're taking responsibility for TiE, and you know Prashant very well, and you've been part of his journey. For you to host this fireside chat with Prashant and with Ritu, who's also one of our charter members, who's also a very successful author, and she does a lot of leadership coaching and involved in a number of activities around thought leadership. So I think this is going to make a very good session. So I'm going to step off now, hand it over to Prantik, Prashant, and Ritu.
Thank you. Enjoy your wine. Ladies and gentlemen, very good evening. It's really a pleasure to be here with Prashant, who's obviously published a book. I'm sure you guys, as you guys stepped in, you would have seen a desk with the copies of the book. Please, after the event, after the dinner, please to take the opportunity to go and not just buy a book, but hopefully you can catch Prashant to get a signed autographed copy as well. Very rare opportunity. So Prashant, thank you for sort of making this happen. And with me, we also have Ritu, who's a celebrated author herself. She's done a lot of executive leadership coaching. Her book's called Leaders Block. I've had the pleasure of sort of reading that book as well. So this evening, we're going to be talking about three things really. The future of marketing. So Prashant's book, if you've seen the book, it's called Made in Future. And Prashant, as many of you would know, he's had a stellar career in the marketing world. It's great to see some of the marketing leaders of Singapore on this side of the table. So Prashant, as many of you would know, he's been a veteran in our industry. I've sort of always looked up to him. He's been a force to reckon with in groups such as IPG, Publicis, and then, as Amit mentioned, he started a company called Entropia, which he eventually sold to Accenture Interactive, which is no mean feat. And I know we have quite a few friends from Accenture here today. So this is a wonderful platform to celebrate his journey as an entrepreneur, as a corporate leader, and now as a published author. And so this evening we'll be talking about marketing leadership and what does the future of leadership and marketing look like. So Prashant, I'm going to start with you. You know, in this book you talked about the new age of marketing. When we all grew up, when we studied in B schools or when we practiced marketing, you know, we always had references to the Kotlers of the world. You know, we learned the 4 Ps. What's new in this new paradigm of marketing?
Hello. Well, thank you. You know, people create media, but we forget that media also creates people. If in the last 20 years, you see how the living experience has changed, the mediated part of our living is becoming bigger and bigger versus the situated living. The mediated component is becoming bigger and bigger. And that changes the basic underlying fabric of how people live, how they think, what they expect as consumers, as people. And that changes everything about marketing to the extent that marketing is all about people, and it connects people to businesses, right? So a lot of holy cows have been challenged in the book, and the whole premise is that marketing needs to be rethought from a white sheet, because I see a huge chasm between where marketing strategy happens and what actually works in the marketplace. Sometimes even the tactics sort of manage to tactically keep pace, but there's a huge disconnect. Probably the single largest source of unlocked value. Probably the reason why majority of marketing transformation projects fail is the lack of that conceptual integrity at the strategic level between what the business needs and what's actually working, all right? So, let me take an example. I mean, Porter's 5 forces model is something which is like 101 of strategy in businesses. If you look at last 20 years, it is extremely difficult to imagine that any established incumbent who has been disrupted would have been able to imagine where the competitive threat is coming from basis the Porter's 5 forces model. Because I mean, there is no way the taxi industry would have imagined that the threat will come from an app. There is no way the restaurant industry would have imagined that the margins will get squeezed out by an application. So when you think about what kind of competitive forces, really, what dimensions is competitive threat moving on, I have proffered for, I'm calling them competitive bars, as a mark of respect for Mr. Porter. It's not that 5 forces model becomes wrong, it just becomes a limited case. You know, I mean, when quantum physics came, Newtonian physics just became a limited case, it didn't become wrong. And the 4 powers that I have proffered is UX power, network power, data power, and brand power. And of course, there is an interplay between these 4 as well. I believe that every business today needs to reassess how the margin pool is going to be distributed in the category ecosystem, in the need state ecosystem in which they operate, based on these 4 dimensions, because that is where the competitive threat is going to come from. That is why Apple, a mobile phone company so-called, if today they launch an Apple car, they talk about launching, there will be millions of bookings. They haven't yet launched a VR headset, but people are already anticipating it for the last 5 years. If Google tomorrow starts a Google education, already you can see millions registering for that. What is common between what these businesses do today versus what these categories are? And the common theme is that competitive threat today moves on UX, power, network power, data power, and brand power. It's as true for supply side as for demand side. It depends on where a network power, for instance, can create value. So that's just one example. Everything I have challenged, the notion of segmentation as we do it, the way we do positioning, the way creativity happens, the way media happens, the way purchase funnel is perceived, the measurement, all dimensions have been questioned to try recast marketing from a white sheet. Sorry, there was a...
No, wonderful. No, I have a follow-through question there as well, because
Sure.
You speak about these 4 powers. I like that play of words there and the interplay. The question now is, how do you sort of how do marketers or business leaders here, what's the sort of next step, next best step that they should sort of take beyond buying and reading the book? Is how do they sort of apply that philosophy? Because with Porter's Core Forces or with any of those frameworks, there was or at least we were taught how to sort of apply that. In your opinion, how does a brand sort of take that framework, if you will, to apply?
So, for instance, there are many implications of that. And this is just one dimension of the book. This is not all, it's just one part of the book. For instance, for thousands of years, brands were made of anecdotes, right? People told stories, songs, ballads, brands were created, kings were fossilized into gods with the power of anecdotes. And then mass media came, and brands started getting created through advertising, right? They're highly centralized, controlled messaging. And then in the last 20 years, we see a lot of brands. You look at some of the most happening brands today, some of the biggest brands today, they hardly spent on advertising. They were brands made of content, right? And today, now we see, increasingly, brands made of what I call data-driven experiences, which is a manifestation of the UX power and network power, all these manifesting itself in actually how brands are getting built. It has taken 20 years to sort of catch up to that, but it's still very rare for marketers to look at their brands that way, right? Data-driven experiences could be everything from how Google used Google Glass to keep their edginess alive for almost 5 years. Even they didn't know whether there was a real market for that, right? There was never product market discovery we talk about in the startup world all the time. That never happened for Google Glass, but it was still, as a beta offering, it was inspiring enough to keep the Google brand really at the cutting edge, right? So, with the power of betas, with the power of UX, UI, which is fundamental. I mean, you are a bank, you can keep doing all the advertising and content you want. If your UX is not right, you are not getting anywhere. With augmented reality and virtual reality, how the medium of living is going to transform. So, branded utilities, a brand made of a lot of macro applications. So I'm saying there are so many ways to look at data-driven experiences. I'm not even talking about personalization at scale, because it's become slightly cliche, even though it's super important. So yeah, that's one way it's going to impact how brand marketing must be seen.
Thank you. Ritu, I'm going to come to you. You've been coaching corporates, leaders. What's your thought process in terms of how do sort of leaders take a philosophy or a concept of this sort, apply it to either their own personal brand? Because again, as you said, these 4 levers or powers could apply to nation brands, individuals, sporting teams, etc. But from a leadership perspective, how would you sort of take these frameworks, these powers, and what should a leader, because we have so many leaders here, what should their sort of use case be, either for themselves as individuals, for their teams, or their corporates?
Yeah, so, I like the way Prashant said holy cows, like he's kind of challenged that. And in my book and in my work, that's exactly what I do. I challenge a lot of norms, and especially about leadership. So one of the things that I kind of claim to say, and that is what is the future of leadership, is that it's no more about a leader being a Superman or a Wonder Woman, right? That's the myth that's breaking. And especially we've seen in the last 2 years, the pandemic really changed where leaders said, we don't know. We don't know. That's the first time, at least I heard in my work with leaders, people saying openly, we don't know. And that was okay. And I think that's the biggest shift we are seeing in the last 5 years, and that just got accelerated now. So that is shifting, and therefore leaders now want to position themselves as more human, more open about saying, okay, the solution can come from anybody. It doesn't have to come from me, right? So therefore, I was relating to what Prashant was saying, the power of network. I know during pandemic, a lot of leaders got together from different organizations and just started talking. What are you doing in your organization? How are you dealing with this, remote work? How are you dealing with people being stuck in different countries, not able to come back home? So that's then the power of networking, which earlier people were doing, but it was more from a business perspective, more networking like that. But then being open about, the problems you're trying to solve and taking suggestions, right? That's one. The other thing is also this whole thing about a leader should act in a certain way, leader should look a certain way. I think that is really changing fast. All the thing about, A-type personalities, or leaders should be aggressive, or should be, should have this kind of persona, all that is breaking fast. And that's what I call, breaking the norms, or looking at leadership for the future. So, yeah.
Nice. I like the whole element how both of you are sort of challenging existing paradigms and adding on to that. A lighter question, right? I think Amit, you spoke about many people can publish books. Some people like to self-publish books, but it's rare when publishers such as Penguin sort of publish books, or you guys have contracts with them. I want to get both your perspectives. You guys are published authors. What's the process from having that idea to sort of writing the sort of figuring out the roadmap to actually publishing and launching it? What's been that experience? Just give us your personal anecdotes. With what we'll have to start with you.
So for me, the idea, and my book is called Leader's Block. Just as writers get writer's block, leaders get leader's block, and that's the whole theme. And that was challenging everything itself because leaders weren't very open to talk about their blocks, right? But this was more like, okay, everybody's gone through a block and will go through a block. So how do you prepare for it? For me, from the idea to a book took me about 2 years. And the reason I say, for me it was a special journey because I came off the corporate world. So I went from writing emails to writing a book. Like I had never blogged, I had never written any stories or anything like that. And I came from running hardcore operations. I was running a P&L, 1,000 people, so it was very that kind of a job, not the creative, not the marketing. And I have a finance background, so like very boring at all levels. So for me, but the joy of the book was actually talking to a lot of people. So for me, anybody who wants to write a book, of course you can have a lot of thoughts yourself, which I did, but the real meat came when I started talking to leaders, when I started interviewing, I started taking their point of view. That really got me thinking, okay, there is something there, and I can start to write. So, yeah.
Thank you, Prashant.
Well, the toughest part is finding something worth writing about. Or that would be worth people's time, right? I mean, people are asking, oh, is this your first book? I said, writing one book was tough enough because you really got to respect people's time, right? So it was a child of the COVID lockdown. I had been on my mind for very long, mainly for reasons of impact. Like, when your circle of influence is bigger than your circle of authority, that is when you know that you are really creating an impact, probably. So lockdown, I couldn't go anywhere. So that is when I started writing. 6 months in one flow, every evening after office. And then Penguin, I had a look, they evaluated the whole proposal, we had a lot of discussions, and then they said, let's do it. So I think the fact that Penguin published a book shows that it's been sort of filtered to some extent. Their copy editors, I have to say, Laura, they totally brutalized the book. I mean, there were so many feedbacks, you feel, oh God, too complex, need examples, things like that, the flow and so on. So thank you for that. That was really fantastic. Penguin have also offered excellent distribution and publicity support, especially in India. So, well, that has been in a nutshell the journey.
Lovely. So, COVID was a blessing in disguise in some ways.
In some ways.
No, awesome. No, I want to touch on your corporate and your entrepreneurial journey. How did that if at all, how did that sort of change your mindset? Because you've been in the marketing industry for so long, you've worked for large agency groups, then you started Entropia with a particular vision, and then eventually sold it to Accenture. Could you just take us through your corporate career, the transition to being an entrepreneur, and then now being part of a very large, very successful consulting firm? How has that sort of changed or crystallized your mindset, and how did that influence what you've sort of written in the book?
So I think I have an unhealthy need for relentless stimulation. So intellectually, creatively. So which means that you keep learning new things and you are always trying to push the boundaries, and that continues even with Accenture. And fortunately, Accenture is the kind of organization which is trying to tap the future all the time. So I have the practitioner's curse. If there are some difficult questions, then I must find an answer that is sufficiently practical. So the book, you will see, has almost 30 to 40 frameworks that can straight away go into people's PowerPoint for application. So even though it might be boring here to talk about those frameworks, so we'll stay at the conceptual level. I think the book at one end is very practical. On the other end, it offers depth. You see, the problem with the with tapping the future in the demand side, in the marketing side, has been that at the tactical executional level, people are doing a lot of things. But how it relates to the big picture of the business, that strategic integration, and then putting the technology side, the data side, the creative side in a conceptually one thinking has been the missing piece. So that was my inspiration, and I saw that when I was the CEO for Asia, the marketers I interacted with, or as Entropia as founder, I saw that time and again, the case with a lot of MNCs and the local blue chips as well.
That's a good one. And that brings me to the next question, Prashant, is, there's a lot of talk in the industry about a lot of clients are sort of taking marketing in-house, or there's a hybrid model. Of course, there's a lot of competition between the consulting firms and the agency groups as well. So again, I'm going back to the 4 levers. I'm sure there's much more to marketing and to what you mentioned in the book. Which, if there are sort of corporate leaders out there, and again going back to applying the philosophies or the points that you have made in the book, what's your advice to them? Like, is this best done in-house, or do they still need partners? Is it, again, I'm probably trying to put you in a spot here, but
No.
between the consulting and the agency groups, who are sort of
in a spot.
who's sort of best positioned to apply? Is it, apply the principles? Are they the clients themselves, the agency groups, the marketers, or the consulting firms? How would you sort of advise clients going about this?
Let us put it this way. People should go with where the best competencies can be accessed at the best cost, right? I believe that large marketing organizations or large organizations which have, demand creation is plays an important role. They have a very fundamental job to do, and especially at this time when the data architecture, the technology side and the marketing side needs to be pulled into one seamless workflow, one seamless organizational structure, one seamless culture. I think those are the challenges, the solutions to which have much bigger payoffs than looking at the more tactical questions of should the external partners do it, should we do it? I think it's inconsequential, at least to this book. We are saying it doesn't matter. You fix your strategic questions, because that is where your big unlocked value lies. Because whatever you may do at the tactical level, if you're not able to bridge that, then it doesn't get anywhere. So,
got that. No, makes sense. I think it obviously starts with the objective and the capacity and the capabilities that you have to sort of solve for that. Ritu, I'm going to ask you a question. You said you've come from a finance operations background, then you've moved to coaching, leadership, executive coaching. As a non-marketer, so to speak, what's been your perception of marketing? How do you sort of look at marketing as a function? And especially when you speak to leaders, what's your sort of non-biased take as to what's the role or utility of marketers from a non-marketer?
That's a tough one now. You're putting me on the spot. It's his interview.
That's my role.
Okay, so for my own book, let's say, that was the first time when I actually thought what marketing would look like. And like Prashant said, I think Penguin has been really good with their marketing and distribution. That was the first time when my book was getting launched. This was like 3 years back. I sat with the marketing team in Penguin, India, and I said, this is what a marketing plan looks like. And actually that gave me a lot of insight, because before that, even for my own work, I wasn't doing anything very actively. It was more reference, word of mouth, like that, right? But what I have seen now in my role as a coach and as a facilitator, and when I talk to leaders, marketing, the way I looked at marketing, and I started my career way back, and when I was with Procter & Gamble, we looked at marketing was like one function, there was a certain way you did it, it was very traditional. But now that I look at it, it's very different. Like, marketing is, everybody's talking marketing. So if I'm coaching a leader who's probably, let's say, a functional lead, HR, they are talking about marketing, or a procurement leader. So everybody is talking marketing. So from my perspective, I'm like, okay, so marketing is not just a function, it's almost everybody's job. So people are talking employee experience, customer experience, then of course the whole brand, but employee brand, customer brand. So all those words which in my as I say, old days was very traditional. Now that terminology is being used at every level. So that's a shift, at least I see, coming from totally non-background and marketing background. So that's a shift. I don't know if it's good or bad, but everybody's a marketer and everybody's a brand right now.
Well said. No, I think definitely, I've definitely seen that sort of trend where marketing, the objective, it's no more a afterthought after the product launch, it's sort of embedded across the process. All right, I have one more question, but before that, I'm going to open the floor for questions, but here's a quick question for the audience. We're not judging, so just a quick check. We're going to be talking about the future, and you can't escape, not talking about metaverse. How many of you have an active account on some sort of a metaverse platform? All right, not bad. Maybe about 10-15% perhaps. I'm going to come to you, Prashant. Do you have a metaverse account? And again, for everyone, I'm guessing maybe 70% of the room doesn't have one. In your simple terms, two simple questions is, what is the metaverse according to you? And is it a fad? After this dinner, do people need to get on a metaverse account? Like, what's the utility, what's the purpose? Especially given that this particular week, there's so much volatility about crypto, there are questions about Web3, the environment we live in. I want to get your sort of open perspective on metaverse and the utility factor of the metaverse.
See, so much of our lives today is mediated living, right? We spoke about that. If you look at the dominant format of this mediated living, it's video. Now consider this. Video is a 125 years old medium. It was invented when cinema was invented in 1894 or something like that. It's really arcane. I believe that extended reality, and metaverse the word can mean many things, let's call it extended. I believe that is the format for next 100 years. The next level of immersion, the data mediated simulation, optimization, twinning, both on the efficiency side, efficiency of living, as well as on the immersive side of living. It offers a whole different level. So the question is not whether it's a passing thing. The question is how fast will it gather? And we are talking about Iris that Google is working on. We are talking about Cambria that Facebook is going to launch end of this year. We are talking about Apple coming up with something in Jan 2023. $100 billion worth of investment is going as we speak into that space. That is the format for next 100 years. And it's going to change a lot of things in very, very fundamental ways. Think about it. Today, digital reality has a junior status to physical reality, right? What happens in the digital world is considered slightly less real and slightly less credible than the physical reality. But when people have such a high component of immersive mediated living, and your avatar, you might be a bald person in the real world, your avatar has long green hair in the mediated world, and 80% of the people see you 80% of the time with that long green hair, who is to say which is more real? So that junior status of digital reality versus, or mediated reality versus situated reality will go for a complete rebalance. Not just that. Look at design, whether it's architecture, interiors, urban design, fashion design. Right now, people are copying in the metaverse how they make things in the physical world, by and large. But we forget that design in the physical world must play by the laws of physics. That is the constraint on the imagination. In the metaverse, that is not true. Finally, creativity, imagination can be completely unshackled from the laws of physics. Now, that eventually will impact back how design happens in the real world, because that is completely unshackled, free design thinking. A whole different level of imagination, a whole different level of creativity. Last point I would like to make is, people want to live more life per life. And watch that phrase, more life per life. What does that mean? For thousands of years, people have wanted to live longer life, right? Immortality. Aging is an ageless cause. But in the last 20 years, we see more life per life moving on two more dimensions. Number one, in the same moment, we are living in sometimes three attention states. the proactive attention, the passive attention, and then there is active attention, right? Or you could define it in whatever ways. We do multiple things at one point of time with the help of screens and stuff like that. The efficiency of living has gone to a different level because we are living multiple lives in the same moment. That's more life per life for you. The third dimension is people do not want to live one single track life. People are living life as a series of S-curves. A 60-year healthy span of life may have 3 to 4 S-curves. Each time you learn new skills, you pivot your profile, you change your industry, category, country, learn new language, get into new relationships, change your hairstyle. People are restaging themselves more and more every 12 to 15 years. Life has a series of S-curves. That's another more life per life. If you were to look at the Darwinian aspect of it, they are trying to explore diverse survival pathways. So, living more life per life is one of the fundamental Darwinian quests on which you can benchmark all human technology on. That is an irreversible curve because it gives higher efficiency of living and it higher enrichment of living experience. So, but it creates complexity of living, and that's why data makes it simple. All right. So, metaverse brings that more life per life because you can live multiple identities in multiple worlds, right? So, it allows you to live more life. So, that is my way of looking at metaverse.
Oh, wonderful. I love your concept of the S-curves, multiple S-curves, and more life per life. But I can't wait to see your avatar on the metaverse with long green hair. With your perspective, how do leaders make sense of this? And there's just so much to unpack in what Prashant just mentioned. But, again, for people who have not used the metaverse, maybe their kids are talking about it, how does one sort of unpack that? Just given everyone's in the physical world that Prashant speaks about, that probably people are just consumed by just so many dimensions. Do we want another dimension at a very philosophical level? And how do you sort of think about this topic?
Okay. So I have a bit of a different opinion there. Maybe that's to do with age. But so I agree with Prashant saying that we have multiple what is the word? Multiple lives and more life per life. A lot of the work I do is getting leaders to focus on this life. Right now, there's also this problem of multitasking, and therefore not one job gets done 100%, right? Or people going through life and not living life. So you're going through all these different experiences, doing all of that, but are you enjoying the moment? Like I work with leaders where, well, in fact, just recently, this morning, I was facilitating this, for a big retail company leadership team conversation, and there was this thing I asked them that, as you look back, is there anything, and we were just wrapping up, is there anything you would do differently? And people said, the time that we would have spent with our family, or the time I would have spent with my kids growing up, things like that, right? So while there is all of this advancement, this metaverse, having multiple versions of ourselves, all of that is great, and I don't, disagree with that. My kids do that all the time. They make things on Mindblock and Roblox and all of Minecraft and Roblox, so all of that is great. But then there is also the thing about the downsides of it, right? Because again, we are talking as leaders, our core job is to connect with people. And how do we connect with people? Only we have time and we have attention, right? We are constantly talking to people, looking at our phones. So how much of attention are we giving that, right? So it's a little bit of trying to balance everything, and that's work I do, is getting leaders back on present. All the metaverse, they do it with their teams.
So on that point, would you not agree that the metaverse could be another channel or way to for leaders to connect with their staff or members or family members who may prefer that platform?
I don't know, Prantik. I haven't really come across, at least talking to the leaders I do, saying that I would prefer to connect with this person on metaverse. There would be like, can I talk to this person? And that's what people want. Because they do all of this on the other thing. There are few people they want to connect in person. Look at the people here. Right? We could have done this on metaverse too, and I'm sure there are things happening. But the joy of just seeing people's faces, hugging each other, talking to each other, sharing a drink, that can't be replaced. And like I said, I may be sounding very old-fashioned, but there is some reality to that too. So there is a balance. That's what I would say. I'm sure Prashant has a view.
No, you are right. Every generation has its own balance between the complexity of living and the harmony of the mind, between the feeling and the fulfilling. Every generation. What you deem complex will not be deemed complex by your children because they are not carrying legacy knowledge. If your lifestyle was seen by your grandfather, you would be scandalized how complex it is. Yet you find it manageable and simple, right? So I'm saying at every inflection point of living in the last 5,000 years, when new technology has made life more complex, of course people have worried. Because with all the generational baggage, people worry whether they'll be able to cope up. But each generation finds its own balance. And that curve is irreversible. Living experience will always gain by higher efficiency. And so of course, it is not to say that face-to-face experience will not be rich, but it's also highly inefficient. So what you lose in efficiency, so I'm saying an experience like Accenture onboarded 100,000 people last year through its metaverse space. Now it wouldn't have been possible to do that in the COVID era otherwise. So I'm saying what you lose in the face-to-face, richness of face-to-face experience, it makes up for it through efficiency and through information layering and through optimization and through various other technology-mediated, data-mediated immersive elements. So,
Thank you. On that note, let me open the floor for questions, the joy of asking in-person questions. So ladies and gentlemen, the floor is all yours. I think we have some microphones. John?
please.
So that do we have microphones? Or we can, yeah.
That's okay, I've got a pretty loud
All
voice.
right, John. In-person voice, loud voice, let's go for it, John.
I just got a question for the two authors on the stage. Are books still around 20 years from now? Because personally, I find myself getting a lot more information, like if Malcolm Gladwell's making a talk on YouTube, I'm doing that now, whereas 10 years ago I was reading his books. I'm just interested to know your opinion on where books go from here.
Sure. So, I'm also pretty loud, I guess. So, it seems that old mediums rarely die. They just find a more niche role in your life. So that's why radio still exists. It has just become, at one point of time, radio was as big as, let's say, internet today, but it found a more niche role. Newspapers, again, they have found a more niche role than they used to enjoy, say, 100 years back. Television, again, it will eventually find a niche role as well, because there is a space for lean back, edited, a larger screen, at-home experience. So I think books will still be around. They will just become increasingly niche in their lives. Plus the conception of book may not be limited by the physical material itself. You know, the conception of a book in the metaverse might be completely different. You know, in Harry Potter, the newspapers talked. That's the conception of newspapers, right? Maybe the new book in a metaverse will actually do many things. So yeah, I see a much more exciting version of books in the metaverse future. Thank you.
For me, I think books will stay, but you're right, the forms will change. Now there's Audible. You know, a lot of authors, of course, you can read an ebook. There's also summarization of books. Also, a lot of authors I know do like a video, like small snippets of the videos of the book, but the base is really still the book, because you know you've got to have all the content there. Right? Also, to what Prashant was saying, we might have, for example, if you're seeing 1,000 books coming out, I don't know how many Penguin publishes, but let's say if you had 1,000 books coming out every month on bookshelves, maybe there could be 200, but those 200, then the publishing houses would really sift through and select the nice ones or the good ones that they think will have the market for it. So some of it will change, the form might change, but I think the content, you know, writing 200 pages or 250 pages, that richness will still be there.
Any other questions?
How are you, Prashant?
Great, Mary.
We're checking here for your success and congratulations on the launch.
Thank you, you are very kind.
I have a cheeky question.
Please.
As your former PR person, I'd recommend you do not answer it. Because we're talking talking about future, I wanted to know what's for Prashant in the future. You've already sold your company to Accenture, you've written a book. What's next for you? And as I said, do not answer that question.
Well, the future is Accenture. There are rare companies in the world who have the length and breadth of capabilities that Accenture has, and the commitment and the will to tap the future. I have been surprised versus what I thought earlier. So thank you. Thanks for asking that question.
This was definitely planted.
For sure. That's very fun. I promise my question is not planned.
All right.
Bite dance. Go on.
Congrats, PK. I'll call you PK because I've always known you as PK. Now, from what you said about your book, Made in Future has kind of ambushed Porter's 5 courses, right? It's not obsolete, but it's a new form.
We build on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah. How has Made in Future ensured that Made in Future's 4 courses are never ambushed? Or have you kind of touched upon it that no new force is coming to ambush your 4 powers?
Well, do I have to answer that?
You have to. Unless your PR manager says no.
Of course, I think Penguin has gone to great lengths to ensure that the social graph is fully maximized. They are usually dancing on my head to make social posts and stuff like that. So I can see that the network power is being leveraged in more ways than one. Data power, less so, but they are moving into data-driven marketing in a few weeks as well. Brand, absolutely. I think the name itself suggests Made in Future is about not band-aiding the past into the future, but rethinking from a white sheet and everything. They've done a great job in terms of focusing on the brand identity and trying to build it in their own ways. So I would say great. And they are working on the UX front. The audio book is going to come very soon. There is a lot more in the pipeline that they have been planning. So, thank you.
Maybe we have time for 2 more questions. Yes, please.
Well, I think I can be very loud if needed. I think as we talk about technology and as we talk about transitions, and both of the authors, you captured it very well. I think the question for you, Prashant, will be, how do we talk about generations during these transitions? How do we make sure that technology moves, and sometimes it moves at faster pace than what people can adapt to? How do we ensure we don't have a lost generation?
I'm the last generation.
No better words.
So I do not think in terms of, unless you are talking about the technology paradox, the fact that each time a new technology comes, how it increases social inequalities, and there are haves and have-nots that it creates, is that your point, or are you talking more in terms of intergenerational transition, adoption of technology as she was referring to?
That in the context of both creating that divide as well as people's adaptation as workers and skills and so on.
Thank you. I mean, coming from WWF, I could imagine that is a very apt question for the times. Well, in certain ways, and let me talk about it. I mean, this is a very big book could be written on that because we are grappling with a world that has never been more unequal than it is right now. But let me talk about it in the context of Web 3.0. Now, Web 3.0 was an ideal it is an ideal that seeks to put the power back into the hands of the people as far as it comes to personal data. And I think it's a great ideal. But when I see actual execution, I see tremendous hypocrisy there. I'm sorry to say that, all right? And I am not at all a cynical person. I am a stubborn optimist. Open source revolution, it was supposed to decentralize things and make it more open architecture and more democratic, but it actually led to even stronger platforms. Web 3.0, I see similar things happening, especially if you look at, for instance, suppose you buy an NFT today. The wallet where you buy an NFT and the server where the blockchain code sits, there are at least 2-3 layers of intermediaries. You know, you have Infura, you have Alchemy, you got the MetaMask, the Coinbase, and all sorts of characters. Chances are very high that at some point of time in the future, there will be a freemium model where very few people will actually pay for the validation to be done through leaderless consensus mechanism. Most people will go for the free model of just the platforms validating it, which kills the whole case of Web 3.0 if you think about it. So I would like to say that the time is right for the civil society, for regulators, and the corporate ethicists to come together and define the parameters on which this future is going to unfold. And to me, that decentralization will definitely help the case of solving the technology paradox or the increasing divide that technology brings generation after generation. Would that go to some length? Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to have a very different angle on that. So when I talk about, or when I hear the word, how we're tackling different generations of the transition, I think of leaders talking about now they have multi-generations in their workforce, right? So that's the question that I get asked very often is that how do you deal with millennials? Like there are courses that are being run on how to work more effectively with millennials. So leaders at that level are even struggling. That what are some of the practices? What are some of the hiring practices? What are some of the retention practices? How do millennials work better? So there is that part too. And some of that, of course, is technology plays a big role because the younger generation is way ahead in terms of their, absorbing the technology and running with it versus probably the older generation. So that's a piece that actually right now organizations have 5 generations working too, right? The big organizations have up to that. So they've got people in their 60s all the way to like a early 20 or 18-year-old. And technology is playing a role in that, and leaders have to kind of grapple with all of that to make sure the organization runs successfully with all of that. So that's my take on different generation and transitioning through different generations.
One last chance for a final tough question. Yes, please.
I was going to make an easy question. Congrats, congrats PK, and respect. I've known PK since my college days. What busy building a business, this exciting development at Accenture, what triggered you to write a book?
Impact. I always believe that the circle of influence must be much bigger than the circle of authority. Because everybody has influence in their authority, by and large. But the ratio between that truly shows the kind of life you have lived. So it's the search for impact. When I get these emails or LinkedIn messages from all these young executives and students in IIT Delhi, IIM Calcutta, and all these who are reading the book, and they say, "Oh, this is really great. We love this thing." It really gives a different kind of satisfaction, which is not different from how in an organization when you mentor someone, bring yourselves possibilities that they didn't foresee. It's a different gratification.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, we've come to the end of the fireside chat. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for you. Now I'm going to invite Nora to stage. Nora, we've heard such great things about Penguin and the great work that you've done. I would like to invite you to come to the stage and unveil the book. And Amit, could I please request you to come back on stage so that Nora can gift you a book. And then we'll get Prashant to hopefully give us an autograph. Physical autograph of the book. I can't read Is Nora still on? Yes, I know. Yes.
Sorry, a little slow.
No, that's all right.
You know.
Publisher, please give me one.
Can we do it together?
Yes. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Amit. Thank you, Nora. Actually, why don't we just get a group photograph with Prashant, Nora, Ritu? With the book?
Yes.
Yeah, your copy.
Okay, ready? Here, 1, 2, 3. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ritu, for joining us. Thank you, Nora. Thank you, Amit. Prashant, we're not going to let you go so easily. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to request Prashant to read us a few excerpts from his book, and then we'll, proceed with dinner and chit-chatting. Prashant, over to you. Any 2 or 3 excerpts that you would sort of like to read for us?
All right. Thank you. All right, so we come to the fag end of this event. Let me take a few minutes to read your excerpts.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I just request your attention, please? Prashant will be reading a few excerpts for us, and then we'll proceed for dinner and carry on. Yes, absolutely.
So, okay. So this is from the epilogue of the book. So this is the last page. The epilogue is called Return on Empathy. All right. So when it comes to businesses, marketing is where business meets people, and hence consumer empathy becomes the God particle of businesses. When there is empathy, there is magic. There is magic of revelation as deep human insights are discovered in the subconscious recesses of our minds. There is the magic of imagination as an understanding of whys leads to a conception of why nots. There is the magic of connection as the more personal the insights we get, the more universal the ideas we will get. And there is the relatively unsung but yet all-pervasive magic of the win-win human spirit that informs all bona fide market transactions. Financial returns in any business are in that sense return on empathy. So this is the last paragraph. I think we're good.
Thank you so much, Prashant. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Prashant. If you guys are interested, there are some coffees outside.
Sorry for keeping you all hungry.
Thank you.
Can I thank all the leaders from Accenture who are here to make this night so special? I'm really, really grateful. Thank you very much. And thank you to all the 5 chapter members for coming here, being our guests. And thank you to all my personal friends.